Hi, Danville. Alan Shields here, Chief of Police for the town, and we are 10-8 and in service, which means we're here to safeguard the lives, rights, and property of everyone we serve. And we do that in an effort to make people's lives better. For the show tonight, we've got, we're going to cover the blotter. We're going to cover A-pillar blindness because we did have an accident. And although I don't have the cause yet because it hasn't been approved by the supervisor, it did remind me of a scenario where A-pillar blindness comes into effect. So I just wanted to pass that on. Also, we had a viewer 2 weeks ago, actually it's going on 3 weeks now, that in the show had brought up speeding on El Capitan. So what we did was I'm kind of using this as an example, is we had put a sign out there for people because the complaint was that it was people speeding like in the morning to drop kids off and that sort of thing. And the concern was with the speeders, the kids on bikes, the kids on their feet walking to school, that created an issue. And so I wanted to explain what it is that we do to evaluate and respond to it to see if we can't reduce the amount of speeders in the area. All right, so first off, we can go and talk about the FEMA all hazards checklist. There's a link in the description. Go ahead and download that. I would suggest printing it out and putting it, covering it and then putting it in a drawer. This will help you prepare for, survive, and be safe during some of the disasters that we talk about on the show. Also, head over to the community warning system by the Contra, Costa County Office of the Sheriff. There you can sign up for alerts. So if there is a disaster, you will make sure that you are notified. There's also a link in the description below to the directions for how to do Nixle. And that's, we covered that in various shows, but that's how those are the two main ways that we will alert you. You can also download the Wildfire Preparedness Guide. And in fact, before we go to that one, I'm going to cover the We've Moved. We'll hit this one for a couple more weeks so everybody knows. We moved from 510 Lagonda Way right next door to 500 Lagonda Way. The parking lots are actually interconnected now. So if you make a mistake, we've actually got a nice sign out front that says, hey, go to the left, and just follow the signs and you'll hit our front door. This is a live show. So if you have any questions or comments or concerns or things that we can do better, let us know right here in the chat, and we'll see what we can do to address those. All right. So we're going to move on to the blotter. In the blotter, we've got communitycrimemaps.com. You can download this, or you can view it rather. You can also set up alerts and get information on what is going on in your neighborhood to include sex registrants. And some of the symbols have changed. We're actually going to cover one of those because this last week, we actually had a crime that we probably haven't seen on there for a while. And that, and I didn't note it on the list here, but there was one aggravated assault that we responded to. We had 4 thefts. We had 1 vehicle theft. It was a little bit of an older vehicle, a 1992 Jeep. 1 reported injury collision and 1 property collision. And it's that injury collision that actually prompted our message on A-pillar blindness. So we're going to make sure that we cover that as well. All right. So on the 7th, we had a theft of property from a locked car on Blackstone Drive. They actually smashed the window and took some sunglasses and stuff out of the glove box. So it's a good example of you could do everything right. You can lock your car. You can, keep everything out of sight in your vehicle. And some cars in some areas will still be targets for people simply wanting to break the window and scour through the glove box and see if they can't find something of value in there. The theft of the vehicle, we talked about that a little bit, but that's that 1992 Jeep Wrangler, and that was on Trish Court. Here's an interesting one. On the 9th, we had theft of credit cards stolen from an unlocked vehicle, and then they tried to use those cards, but the cards were quickly denied. So good job on the owner for quickly reporting that in. On the 12th, we had a petty theft from, I never thought I'd say this, a theft of alcohol from Taco Bell. I can imagine 15-year-old Alan going to Taco Bell for lunch, never seeing alcohol there, and now we're seeing thefts of alcohol from Taco Bell. Felony assault on the 12th. I'll cover that in just a little bit more. And then we had a stolen license plate from a vehicle on San Ramon Valley High School in the parking lot. And that was someone that was parked there on the 13th from about 1 to 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So the felony assault, this was at the Circle K. Officers responded to someone that was being assaulted. Good witnesses called in and said, hey, this is what we're seeing. And we actually just talked about this last week. We said what to do if you are a witness to a crime. And I have to say that the multiple callers that called in and reported what they saw did very, very good. Ultimately, the officers responded there. They were able to arrest the person and send him to jail, and we were able to get charges filed on that person today. So the DA did file charges on that. And so that person remains in custody. So very, very good job by our witnesses, and our officers responded very, very well as well. So good job there. Okay, so I've got some usual good evening. So Gary, Lou, and Bob, good evening. Bob, great to see you. And Bob, I'm going to apologize on air in front of everybody. You called me several weeks ago saying you were in town, and I did not get the message in time. So I apologize. I would like to meet up for coffee again. That would be great. All right, so we did have an accident. Let me go back to not the blotter. Let me go one slide up here. So on the 7th, we had an injury collision on Lawrence Road in Camino Tasajera, and that's the one way out east. That's the yellow stake that you see out east. And then we had a non-injury collision down near San Ramon Valley Boulevard. And that was it for the reported collisions. And but I do want to talk about the injury collision part of that and how it looks. If you all remember, we actually did talk about A-pillar blindness and those sort of things. So I have an old video, and it's not that old, I guess, but it's a video from Al Kalin, and he is on our bike advisory committee for the town. Avid cyclist, rides all over the place, gave us this video to use. It's a video that's mounted on his bike. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that video. And if you've watched the show before, you've probably seen these videos, but they are good videos. So you're going to see a view and a perspective from the cyclist. And what you're going to see is you're going to see a car in front of the cyclist and offset a little bit. And the car actually has a stop sign. The cyclist does not. So the cyclist has the right of the way all the way through this intersection. And what you're going to see is you're going to see the car come towards the cyclist. And I don't know, it wasn't our case to investigate, so I don't know this for sure. But this is typically what you see when you see A-pillar blindness. And what we hear when we talk to the people, and we're like, how did you not see the cyclist, the pedestrian, the runner? I never saw him coming. It wasn't until I hit him that I saw him. And if you see this video, I want you to see how that offset and the inability to see the driver and their face kind of shows that. So here is the view from the cyclist. And you'll see the car on the right is the one we're concerned with.
Whoa, hey! Ah!
Okay, so you can see that as that car is coming forward, the A-pillar, which is, if you look at a car from the side, you're going to have the A-pillar, which is in front of the front door, the B-pillar, which rests right near the driver's head, and the C-pillar, which is behind the back seat. So I'm concerned in talking about the A-pillar. That's the one that is on either side of your windshield. And if you look, and I'll see if I can't get this to play again, I really want you to look, think about it from the cyclist view. Can the cyclist see the face of the driver given where that A-pillar is? And then in turn, can the driver see the cyclist? And then we'll talk about what, as a driver, should we be doing to ensure that we see the cyclist, because we have a responsibility to make sure the intersection in front of us is clear. So see how the car's coming forward?
Hey!
And that's what occurs. Okay, so you can see, and again, I don't know it for fact. I'm just saying that when we see A-pillar style collisions, that is usually how we see it. And so frankly, what I do, if you ever see me drive, or what I tell my kids is, as you're approaching an intersection, and it's especially important when you make the left turn, because what'll happen is, and I've got another video where I went out on the downtown streets to show you how that A-pillar can really block your vision. That A-pillar will keep you from seeing someone in the crosswalk. And so what we ask people to do is you really have to circle your head around and look to make sure that you are looking around that pillar. And it's fortunate, unfortunate, but those pillars are being designed in such a way that they're very, very thick and they're sturdy, and they prevent the roofs from collapsing and rollover collisions. So for collisions and keeping the car intact, they do a phenomenal job. But because they're increasing in width, that means your blind spot increases as well. So let's take a look. This is some video that I shot a while back. Now look at the pedestrians coming from the left-hand side. You can see they're right in my A-pillar. Are they going to go on the crosswalk to the right where the car's coming up? Where are they? And now you can barely see them coming in. They're actually crossing the street. So if I was making that left turn and that was where my A-pillar was, I never would have saw those people. It would have been very difficult to see where those people are. So again, check out the A-pillar. That is almost taking up that entire four-door Jeep there. Here's another A-pillar. The dog and the owners kind of came out of nowhere. And we'll play this one more time because I want you to see the pedestrians on the left-hand side, and they're going to cross, and they're going to go into where if I were turning left, that's where I would turn. I never would have seen them until I was completing the turn. And frankly, a lot of times by then it's too late. Here you can see the Jeep pull into the left right in that A-pillar. That A-pillar is big enough to where it takes up that entire Jeep. So certainly it's going to take up a person, a cyclist, or something the same. And then you see how the dog and the owners came out of pretty much nowhere. So just pass that on. Do me a favor. If you can, share this to your page and really highlight and say, hey, check out the 13-minute mark where the chief talks about A-pillar blindness. This is a significant problem. We do see a number of crashes when we start to analyze them that are from this. And usually there are worst crashes because it involves a pedestrian or a cyclist. And those tend to be the most vulnerable because they're not surrounded by the car. So if you can do me that favor, take those videos or take this episode in particular and just share it with your friends and say, hey, check out the A-pillar blindness. And I think we marked it at about 12 minutes and 30 seconds or so. So go ahead and do that. All right. So I'm going to check the chat and see if there's anything in there. I want to remind everybody this is live. So this is a good opportunity. This is where you have access to the police department, directly to the police. Okay. So Gary is offering the exact advice that I take when I ride my bike. And Gary says, as a cyclist, I always want to make eye contact with the driver. Often I will point to them so they're aware of my presence. What Gary's doing is he's saying he wants to make sure that the people driving the car see him. So as the driver, we want to make sure that we see where we're blind, right? As the cyclist, knowing that we're the vulnerable ones, or as the pedestrian, knowing we're the vulnerable ones, we want to make sure that we see. And I see it all the time where I'm coming down like Harts Avenue, especially Harts and Prospect. And I wouldn't know why people would do this, but I'll see them with their head right in their phone as they're walking across the street. And they think that they have the right of way and they can just go out. And we've talked about it in previous shows, but the deal is for pedestrians is yes, you have the right of way once you are in the crosswalk, but you as a pedestrian carry the obligation not to enter the road until it's safe to do so. So you can't just put your head in your phone and walk. Larry has a good question and says, hi, Chief, is there a buy, sell, exchange spot in the new parking lot? So Larry, we have not taken down our old safe trade zone. And that's where you can come and you can meet, and it's at our old 510 lot, but it's right next door. And we still have a camera pointing right on it. And what it is you can go and there's 2 to 3 spots that are lined up where if you can do your transaction there, should something happen, we'll have it on video. And so we see a lot of people use it for child custody exchanges. We see it for internet sales. And think about it, if you tell someone on the internet, like, hey, meet me at the police department, you're probably just by that alone less likely to get ripped off versus meet me at Starbucks, meet me at wherever, right? What I'll say is we're working on getting cameras hooked up to this building. And when we get them hooked up to this building that are facing that safe trade zone, the new one, we're going to publicize that location as well. But as of right now, the old one is still there. So Debbie, so this is good. So Debbie, you know what I'll do though? So Debbie says not only A-frame, but the shadows can block bikes too, from the shady trees. Debbie, you're absolutely right. And we have a video, and what I'll do is I'll actually queue that one up for next week. And we'll talk about crosswalk safety again because it's an issue. And I'll play that video and you'll actually see the car will be driving and it's a dash mounted camera on the car, and the bike will come right out of the shadows and the car never had a chance to see him. I mean, and this driver, you can really see, I blur out the face, but you can really see he's got no chance to see him. And he is really focused on the road. So John says, any chance you will issue CCWs as the CC sheriff is clearly not issuing post-Bruin ruling. So John, so just so you know, I'm a lieutenant with the sheriff's office assigned to the town of Danville as the police chief. And so I'm actually subordinate to the sheriff. And the sheriff has actually done a really good job because this is a huge influx. And I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of the sheriff, but if you go to the sheriff's website, he's actually got information on there about the influx and what they're doing to work through the issue. So they're working very hard in that unit to to work through these issues. But I appreciate you bringing that up. But I, as a member of the sheriff's office, I'm not an independent chief. Therefore, I don't issue them independent of the sheriff. The sheriff does that. Okay. So Gary, with the new mobile speed signs, have you purchased solar panels for them? So Gary, we have two. Our only issue now is we're trying to get them mounted to a temporary style pole. So the solar panel, the speed sign, we can just kind of pop them out on Camino Sahara, because that seems to be the one area where we're only getting like 2 or 3 days in that. And so John, you did a follow-up to the CCW question. And CCW, if I didn't say it in the first comment, CCWs are concealed carry weapons permits. So John says applied in July, no reply. I'm not sure if you're, what the status is on the backlog. I don't work in that unit, but I would just encourage you to, again, contact the professional standards unit at the sheriff's office. I understand the frustration. I get it. But they went from a small amount of people, and they had staffing to manage that. And you can imagine with the ruling, there was a great influx in that. So I do apologize for that delay. So Gary says, since we now have 2 additional traffic officers, can we implement a dedicated traffic enforcement officer for a significant period on Communitas and Sycamore? It would seem that such dedication would be justifiable, as it's the main thoroughfare for our town. So I can tell you that we dedicate more than that. So if you look at a map, and I'll maybe what I'll do is I'll create another whole segment for this next week. We actually do a great deal of enforcement downtown, because that's where about 30% of our accidents happen. And I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40% occur throughout the rest of town, with a concentration of about 20% being down the Communitas corridor. The issue with Communitas is, even though it's maybe fewer collisions than in our downtown area, the collisions are at greater speed, tend to be injuries. And so we do place a higher emphasis on that Communitas corridor, because we do know that that's the possibility there. All right. So I'm going to go to, we have a couple more slides here I want to get to, and this is going to talk about those speeds. So it's exactly what Gary was talking about, the speed signs. We have these radar signs that'll say, hey, you're going too fast, and we can actually pull data from them to show you when it is. And I think the recommendation from a few weeks ago from one of our friends down on El Capitan, Orange Blossom area, is actually very, very good. And I'll show you why. So this allows us to, well, let me say this. So traffic enforcement oftentimes tends to be a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole, where exactly what Gary said, we'll focus in an area real hard for a period, get people to change behavior. But then as we're doing that, other areas are starting to spring up where people don't see as much enforcement. And then so we have to move on. But having data to support why we're doing allows us to go out and use much more resources, maybe even dedicate overtime shifts and such to it. So let's take a look at what the data says. Now, this sign was placed on El Capitan at Mustang, and this is an area that is about 2 blocks from Osage Park and Charlottewood Middle School. It's to the west of it, so it lies between Camino Ramon and Charlottewood Middle School. So you can imagine a lot of people dropping their kids off for school are going to use that corridor, or those using the park are going to use that corridor. Now, although we don't have very many accidents in that area, and I'm going to write a note on that, because I want to make sure I include that specifically. So, accident map. Sorry for the pause, but if I don't write it down, I won't remember, and I want to make sure I remember for next time. Although we don't have very many accidents there, speeding and complaints from residents are an indicator that accidents may start to come. So let's take a look at this real quick, and you can see. So on this distribution, so this map is, or this chart is a 2-week period, and it shows how the speeding or the speeds are distributed throughout 5 mile per hour increments. And so if you look, there's very few in the 1 to 10 to 15 miles. As we get to the 21 to 25, you can see it creeps up, and it does fall off very well. So what this tells us is that the majority of people are following the rules. But look at those at 36 to 40, 114 cars, 114 in a 2-week period drove between 36 and 40 miles an hour. That's 10 to 15 miles an hour over the speed limit. That is a significant increase over 25 miles an hour. And then if you were to follow that down, you can see there's still some cars at 41 to 55. And even there was one car driving between 51 and 55 miles an hour during that period. Now, this is good at identifying that there's a problem. So this says, hey, Chief, there's a problem. You need to get some people out there and we need to do some aggressive enforcement. So how do we know when to enforce? So then we look at the distribution by day, or rather by time of day. So in 1 hour increments, and then by speed. Now I put 2 boxes here because the bottom line is 25 miles an hour is the speed limit. So that means if you're going 26 from a technical definition, you are speeding. And so if you look, the yellow box, which is, we can call that a warning box, but that is certainly when you're getting into the category of speeding. So this is 26 to 35. That's the 2 bins. You can see, and I'm concerned with the 26 to 30, although that tends to be the majority of cars are in the gray area between 21, 25, and 26 and 30 miles an hour. In the 31 to 35, there is double digits in every category for almost the entire part of that middle part of the day. So that is a significant number of cars that are going 31 to 35 miles an hour. Now look at 36 to 40. Once you start going 36 to 40 miles an hour in a 25 zone, it's now going to take you anywhere from 30 to 50 feet longer to stop. That's the length of a house or two, right? So start looking at that from 36 to 45. You look at 11 o'clock, there's 10 cars. You look at 1 o'clock, there's 12. You look at 2. So this is getting into the pickup hour for school. We're getting 12, 13, 12. So that's a pretty significant issue. And then if you look at the 41 to 55, you can see more cars. Now, earlier we had mentioned that there was a car that went 51 to 55 miles an hour. That was much later in the evening hours. But I wanted to show you how that distribution lies and why it's important that we have officers out there to enforce that, because that does not go away on its own. So I do appreciate that when people write in, that this is something that we do look at and we take it seriously. We deploy resources, whether it's our volunteers, the signs, but most certainly in a case like this, we need officer support out there. So not only do we deploy our traffic officer, but we encourage and direct our patrol officers. So the officer that's responsible for that area, we pose this as a problem to them and say, this is a problem that you must fix and you must work on. Our traffic citations are actually up over the past month or two. So we are seeing greater enforcement. And it isn't that we set quotas. It's not that we set requirements. We don't demand people write certain number of tickets, but the amount of tickets that are written over a given period of time is a measure of the level of enforcement for an area. All right. That's what I have for that. So let me see if there's anything else in the chat. So Gary, I'll address this by saying the town of Danville is very frugal. So we being good stewards of all of your money, we try to be as frugal as we can. And there is great value in having it done over the air. But what Gary asks is, are you getting this data, being the speed data, are you getting it fed to you live, or do you need to download it from the sign? In order to do it from the sign and have it done automatically, we would have to pay a monthly subscription fee. It is fairly expensive, and we believe that we can use that money elsewhere to provide services. And so we actually use our parking enforcement. And so what they do is they just bring a computer out to the sign, they download the data, and then upload it to the site right there. So it's not the most efficient process, but it does exactly what we need. And we feel that we're doing it at a cost savings to the community, and we're able to do that. So Debbie says, also a shout out to the Danville Connect app, works great. So Debbie, that's a good mention. And I think it's always good to remind those that do not, that don't have that app downloaded, that is a good app. So if you have a street light that's out, if you have anything that you need, it is your All Things Danville app. And this is what it looks like. So if you're looking at it for the App Store, if you wanted to point out that a street light is out, that maybe a signal light is malfunctioning, there's a pothole that needs fixed, I tell you what, you don't see them because they fade into the background, but your maintenance team that works here in Danville, those are the ones in the light blue shirt driving the trucks all over. They're taking care of the parks, the roadways, all of that. They're the ones that are out there at special events, making sure that, and helping the police department staff, making sure the roads are closed. they really go unseen, but they're out there working hard every day to make sure Danville is looking absolutely perfect. But we need your help. So if you see something that needs repair, you can use the Danville Connect app. You can find it on the Google Play Store, the App Store. Download it. It's really good too, because you don't just send your request off. Once you send your request off, you can actually check your request. And so I'll actually show you mine real quick. So if you look, when I go through town, I've got graffiti, vandalism, signal lights, general maintenance. So a lot of things I put on there, and I get to keep track of all those things that I've reported. So if I report the street light that's out in front of my house, I'll actually get an email response saying, hey, we've sent that, it's being fixed, or it is fixed. The pothole has been repaired. I've even seen where the plates that cover up underground electrical equipment and that sort of thing, where those plates have been off and shifted over, and I almost ran into one with my bike. So I drug the plate back over and I took a picture of it, sent it to our maintenance folks. They had it fixed the next day. That's phenomenal. I mean, how many times do we drive through a city and you hit the same pothole 10 times? Well, that should not happen in Danville. And I'll admit, we're all over town, but we don't see everything that you see. So this is how you can be a good partner and direct us where we need to do. Kimberly, good job. Just download it. That's great. And Gary says, yeah, Gary, this is interesting. So Gary brings up that it's a Go Request app, and that Danville and Mount Diablo get more. So you can actually download one for Mount Diablo as well. And so if you're thinking about riding up, especially during this time of year, you can get weather information from the top of the mountain, so you can know it's maybe a little too cold to go up. Maybe it's icy, so you can plan accordingly. All right, let's see if there's any more comments here. All right. Let me know this. If you're watching live, if you're watching afterwards, let me know who has actually gone and signed up for CWS alerts. Let's do like an informal poll here. If you've logged in, I just want to know that, hey, I've logged in and I've signed up for CWS alerts, and let's see if we can get those numbers up. And then who's downloaded the FEMA guide and the wildfire preparedness guide, and see who's got that. But I would encourage you, there's a link in the description for the FEMA all hazards checklist. Also, I would go down there and download the wildfire preparedness and evacuation guide, and then sign up for alerts on the community warning system. That is the best way to stay connected. We're also going to suggest, and we're going to kind of revamp our notes in later episodes, but we're going to direct everybody to our Stay Connected page, because it has all those links that I put in the description. And so Kim says Kim, I'm going to have to guess that you were probably like a 4.0 student, because you're just knocking this one out of the park. She says, me, and I posted on Facebook for FEMA. Awesome. So Kim, thanks. Kim, I'll tell you this right now. It's because of people like you that cast that message out and that echo that message that your friends are going to know. I just talked to someone yesterday that was a victim of a burglary, and she was telling me, and she's an Alamo resident, so she's close by, but she's like, look, I was a victim of a burglary, and I heard there's all these burglaries, and nobody was telling us that these burglaries were occurring. And so I had a good conversation with her, and I directed her to this show, because we talk about all the crime that happens, and I don't keep anything from you. If there's a burglary that happens, you're going to see it on the map. If there's a robbery that happens, right? Like, that's a pretty heinous crime. And people think that we try to, and I'm not saying that she said this, but sometimes we get the impression that people say that we try to make Danville look rosy and beautiful. And that's true. We do. But we don't do it by hiding things. We do it by making Danville into a beautiful place, and that's through the partnership and the help that we get from all of you. But we don't keep things from the public, so that's why we put this information out there. And so I do really appreciate Kimberly, you doing the repost. So that's great. Martha, thanks, and Cece, great. You both downloaded and subscribed for the community warning system. All right, with that, we are 10:10, which means we're off duty, but we're always 10:08 in service to all of you. Have a good night, Danville.